Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Look, if you've noticed lately that pitching features and pricing just isn't working the way it used to, well, you are definitely not alone. Modern buyers absolutely despise traditional selling. They're incredibly smart. I mean, before you even jump on a call with them, they've already researched your competitors, they've read the reviews, and they probably know your pricing tiers better than you do. The internet has totally democratized product research, giving them literally endless options. They don't want to be sold to, period. So today, we're going to look at the data and the actual methodology behind why shifting to a consultative approach can completely transform your sales results. We're talking about turning you from a highly replaceable commodity into an absolutely indispensable long-term partner. So here is our game plan for today. 1. Beyond traditional vendor sales. 2. What is consultative selling? 3. The psychology of buying. 4. The consultative selling process. And finally, number 5, the consultative sales mindset. All right, let's jump right into section 1, beyond traditional vendor sales. To really get this, we have to establish the stark reality of the market right now. Just pitching features, specs, and pricing, that usually just leads to a race to the bottom where, honestly, everybody loses. The old school vendor is just there to supply a product and charge a price. They hand over an order form, cross their fingers, and hope for the best. But a consultative seller, they operate on an entirely different planet. You are no longer just a vendor hawking a commodity. You are a partner, actively focused on generating a measurable return on your customer's investment. Think about it like this. Say you're selling software. A traditional vendor pushes the licenses and all the fancy technical features. But a consultative seller figures out how that exact same software is going to save the client, say, 40 hours of manual labor a week, and then translates that directly into tangible profit. You aren't just handing them an invoice, you're submitting a comprehensive business improvement proposal. That's a huge shift.
Moving on to section 2, what is consultative selling?
Let's get really clear on what this methodology actually is. Because, and this is super important, it is definitely not just about being friendly or building a nice relationship. Relationship selling on its own, it simply doesn't cut it anymore. Consultative selling is fundamentally about stepping in and acting like a true consultant. It's about providing long-term value and finding tangible, undeniable ways to impact their bottom line. Ask yourself, why is your client in business? To make a profit, right? Therefore, your primary job is to help them either increase their revenue or decrease their costs. That's the whole shebang. If you're just a friendly vendor, you're basically a line item expense that gets slashed the second budgets get tight. But if you are actively driving up revenue or crushing operational costs, you become an indispensable asset. Bottom line, if your solution doesn't tie directly back to enhancing their profitability, you're missing the mark entirely. Okay, section 3, the psychology of buying. Let's look at why buyers actually pull the trigger. Get this. 85% of B2B decisions are completely emotional. Crazy, right? We all like to imagine corporate buyers as perfectly rational robots sitting in cold, sterile boardrooms just calculating ROI on giant spreadsheets. But the research proves that logic alone will absolutely not close a complex deal. Buyers are human beings, and human beings are governed by their emotional centers. If you can connect with a customer on an emotional level about their deep business challenges, their daily frustrations, and their long-term aspirations, you are far, far more likely to win their trust and ultimately the sale. Logic is just what they use to justify the purchase to their boss. But emotion? Emotion is what actually drives the decision to buy in the first place. So, to tap into that emotion effectively, we have to understand the two major drivers, pain and gain. Gain is the desire to grow profits, to expand, to win. But pain? Pain is a problem that's actively costing the business money, time, or market share right this second. And uncovering a client's specific pain triggers the limbic system in their brain. Capitalizing on this is absolutely crucial because the data shows us that pain is actually 4 times greater of a motivator than gain. Let me put that into perspective. A business owner will work moderately hard to make an extra $10,000 in new revenue. Sure. But if they realize they are actively bleeding $10,000 a month due to some operational failure, they will panic. They will move literal mountains to stop that bleeding immediately. As a consultant, your job is to find the bleeding. If you help them uncover the real pain holding them back, you exponentially increase their motivation to take action. Now, you might be wondering, how do you uncover that pain without making the buyer feel like they're strapped to a chair under a bright interrogation light? Well, this is where we borrow a brilliant 2,500-year-old technique from the Greeks.
Just like the philosopher Socrates did with his students, top salespeople use careful, open-ended questions to help the buyers self-realize their own pain points. Instead of just blurting out, "Hey, your software is slow and costing you money," a Socratic seller asks something like, "How often does your team experience delays with the current software? And what's the downstream impact of those delays on your weekly output?" See the difference? You aren't telling them what's wrong. You're guiding them to discover it themselves. They're literally selling themselves on the severity of the problem. It completely bypasses their defenses and naturally builds a massive amount of internal urgency to fix the issue.
All right, section 4, the consultative selling process. This is your step-by-step blueprint. We can break this consultative process down into 2 really distinct phases. Phase 1 is all about discovery, and it requires a super methodical approach. Step 1, learn. This means doing your homework. Research your leads, know their industry trends, read the recent company news before you ever pick up the phone so you actually have real context. Step 2, listen. When you do finally connect, practice radical empathy. Ask those open-ended Socratic questions we just talked about, and then simply shut up and absorb what they're saying. Don't sit there formulating your next response in your head. Just listen. Step 3 is dig deeper. Never take their first answer at face value. A truly great consultant will ask why 3 times until they hit the actual financial or operational root cause. And finally, step 4, customize. Only after you deeply, comprehensively understand their exact situation and root pain do you even attempt to tailor your pitch to solve it. Then we move into phase 2, which shifts from investigation to active, dynamic collaboration. You're no longer sitting across the table, you are sitting on the same side, working right alongside them. Step 1 here is educate. You've got to provide the prospect with fresh industry insights on the real impact of their challenges. Step 2, solve. Act like an extra team member. Co-author the business case with their internal champions and figure out the solution together. Step 3, close. When it's actually time to ask for the business, you don't just sheepishly ask for a signature. You provide concrete, undeniable proof of the ROI they're going to get. And, crucially, step 4, integrate. The process doesn't just magically end when the ink dries on the contract. True consultative sellers integrate with the client. You do things like quarterly business reviews, focusing purely on making sure that the profitability you promised actually materializes for them over the long haul. Okay, our final section, number 5, the consultative sales mindset, the internal DNA.
As incredibly powerful as this step-by-step process sounds, the biggest point of failure actually isn't the strategy itself. Nope, it's the internal DNA and mindset of the salesperson trying to execute it. To succeed as a true consultant, you've got to possess a highly specific set of character traits. You need radical authenticity and deep empathy for what your client is struggling with. But honestly, perhaps the hardest shift for most professionals is just letting go of the need for universal approval. The traditional relationship seller just wants to be everyone's buddy. But if you're desperate for the client to like you, you're gonna fold on pricing at the very first sign of resistance, and you won't have the stomach to point out the critical, glaring flaws in their current operations. A consultative seller has the courage to ask the tough, uncomfortable questions. Questions about shrinking budgets, failing initiatives, operational bottlenecks. You have to be confident enough to stand your ground, acting as a trusted, objective advisor rather than just an eager-to-please vendor.
Now look at this. The data separating top performers from the rest of the pack is absolutely staggering. When evaluating sales pros across all kinds of industries, nearly 80% of top performers hold supportive, empowering beliefs about their own value and their fundamental right to ask deep, probing, consultative questions. Meanwhile, the bottom tier of performers, a tiny 5% possess these supportive beliefs. 5%! The rest are completely paralyzed by their own internal self-limiting narratives. They think things like, oh, it's not polite to ask a business owner about their money, or I'm being too intrusive if I ask how this problem affects them personally, or I just don't have enough authority to challenge their current strategy. Listen to me. If you let those internal fears and self-limiting beliefs cloud your judgment, you will inherently hold back. And if you hold back, you will never be able to consult effectively or uncover the deep pain that's absolutely necessary to drive a complex sale.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a really provocative thought to take into your very next client meeting. Take a hard, honest look at your pipeline right now and ask yourself, are you simply pitching commodities and hoping someone hands you an order form, or are you actively supplying profit? Because I promise you, in today's highly competitive market, if you aren't acting as a strategic consultant who actively drives your client's bottom line, your competitors absolutely will be. The choice to step up from a basic vendor to an indispensable partner is entirely yours. Make the shift and just watch how your client relationships and your revenue completely transform.